Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. We are in the middle of our position group looks on the team. We've gone through quarterback, running back, and tight end group so far. Now up to the wide receiver group. Fun group, actually. It's quite deep, especially at the top, and looking forward to the conversation. Welcome in.
Yeah, it's very talented at the top. One of the best wide receiving cores in the NFL through the top three players, which sounds very homerish to say, but you look statistically, and if you watch film, you're going to say that both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are top 20 or 25 wide receivers in the entire NFL. And then they added the best wide receiver in the last draft class, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, and they're three deep with elite players. And how many other teams can say that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jackson Smith-Njigba has not done anything yet in the NFL. Also,
true.
His last real productive season was in 2021 in college, and last year he missed all but 3 games with a hamstring injury and 5 receptions last year. So there's a lot of projection there, but it's decent projection. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, but he was also an elite player.
He was elite. He would have gone top 5 in the 2022 draft had he been there. 3.93 short shuttle and 6.57 3-cone both point to like a 98 percentile elite agility that this guy has. Now, his straight line speed was like 4.52 or something like that. So right out of the 4.4 range, which is, whatever. But he is definitely a route runner, a guy that can separate himself all the way around. But we'll talk about him in just a second. Let's start at the top, where I think these two players deserve our attention first and foremost. Tyler Lockett, 8 seasons as a Seattle Seahawk, 533 catches, 7,100 yards, 54 touchdowns, 4 straight seasons over 1,000 yards. Guy just does it all. Doesn't get the accolades. He's probably right around between 8 and 12, I think, overall as a wide receiver. If you take a look at his numbers, his advanced stats, his targets and catch rate and all that kind of stuff is just really amazing. And he's definitely a special player. And then you take a look at DK Metcalf's numbers. 4 years, 306 receptions, 4,218 yards, 35 touchdowns. You extrapolate those numbers, they even transcend Tyler Lockett's numbers. And so 2 special players at the top at the receiving position for the Seattle Seahawks.
It's odd to me that most people will say, hey, DK Metcalf is an elite receiver, one of the best in the NFL, all that, but they won't say the same for Tyler Lockett, where Tyler Lockett has been an elite player and statistically has done everything you could possibly want from him for years and years, like just in a row, and yet he doesn't get the same respect. I think it has to do with his stature being like 5'10". If he was 6'2", people would talk about him as being, an absolutely, player that you have to game plan around and all that, but he's not.
There's not a spot in the NFL where he would go to a team and he wouldn't be the number 1 or number 2 overall wide receiver in that room.
Agreed.
Yeah, maybe there's a couple of teams maybe where he'd be the 3rd wide receiver, but he would be
Miami.
He'd be the best. I mean, he'd be the best slot wide receiver in the NFL if he was a 3rd wide receiver. Yeah.
Like I'd say Miami is the one that I know for certain he would be the 3rd.
Yeah.
But it's hard to go beyond that. if I'm
Right.
being honest.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
He came into the league as an unheralded, guy, a third round guy. We went up and got him mostly because he was an elite kick returner at the time, needed to develop a little bit on his route running and so forth as a wide receiver. Came in and to the Seahawks' delight and surprise was way more advanced in his route running tree than he was given credit for, and immediately played right away at wide receiver, but was a featured punt returner and kick returner, and earned a Pro Bowl bid in his rookie season before
mhm.
he was injured. And then, the team wanted to protect him a little bit more after that. And so his role as a returner diminished, his role as a wide receiver increased, and no looking back after that first season. And he's been an impact player ever since in this league. Now, talk about DK Metcalf, Keith. Coming into the league is in the last pick of the second round in 2019, correct? And 4-year career, like I said, 306 receptions, 4,200 yards, and 35 touchdowns. Just a really nice impact player. And I think if he was on a different team with I'm just talking elite quarterback that was in a pass heavy offense, that guy would be a perennial all pro.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of it is he is playing Seattle, where they're a run first team, and um, there's that part. But 4 years in the league, he's over 4,000 yards. He's averaging 1,000 yard season. He's averaging 8 touchdowns per season. His first 2 years in the league, he dropped a lot of balls too. Um,
That's very true.
and but they were concentration drops. He's really fixed.
And he was just being thrown at into tight windows and
Yeah.
basically looked at as being, making spectacular catches, or just you didn't get the ball.
Yeah, so now you've got him, the last couple of years, he hasn't dropped balls. He's, been the focus of other teams' defenses. You're seeing him
Yeah.
double covered, at times triple covered, especially when Lockett got hurt at the end of last year. You were seeing, there was a cornerback on him, there was a safety who was assigned only to him on top of that, and then you often had another corner drifting back into his zone, into his area, just because they were so worried about him. Defenses plan around DK Metcalf.
And he's the
He's
most
big
physical
deal.
wide receiver in the NFL, and he is
Absolutely.
treated as such. And you go
Yeah.
watch him play, and he's just literally beaten up the entire game.
Yeah,
People
but
are
he
man coverage, press coverage on him, shoving him, pushing him. He's out there blocking. He's after the catch. People are sending like an entire defense to tackle him in like a big huge pile on. It's crazy the way
yeah,
that I perceive that. Now,
but it doesn't
is
really
that
affect
wrong?
him that much.
I think
I
it does a little bit. I mean, as far as the
well,
mental game, we've had a few issues now and again about DK Metcalf kind of losing it a little bit and getting having players get under him. That's
but
the only thing.
I think that's an immaturity issue that he's still growing out of. Um, but as far as the physical side of it, I equate this to, being Shaquille O'Neal in the NBA, where he had guys climbing on him, he had guys like slamming into him, and he just literally would just
Flipped
take
him
it.
off
And
like a fly.
yeah,
Yeah.
guys would bounce off him, and it didn't matter. I mean, these were things that would have been fouls against any other player, but it's Shaq, and he doesn't move, so they don't call a foul on him. Um, you see a lot of that with Metcalf. Like guys are like all over him in coverage, and that's like that should be that should be a penalty. But it's Metcalf, and he just kind of like shrugs it off. They can't even move him off his route, no matter how hard they're hitting him, and so he doesn't get the call. He's just that much bigger than the defensive backs that he's going up against. And honestly, like the rub on him coming out of college was that, yeah, he was an athlete. He was, cut and super muscular and just a freak athlete, but he could only run in straight lines. What part of his
Yeah.
game that you've seen since he became a pro would suggest that is an accurate assessment? Because
Yeah, no,
he does a
absolutely.
lot more than run in straight lines.
Absolutely. Yeah, since he's coming to the league, Keith, everyone was wrong. He came in and ran a pretty nice route tree for his rookie year. Had an outstanding rookie season. Just blew us away, really. Set expectations even higher the next year, and he blew those away. And now, after coming into his 5th season, he really is able to run any route that he wants.
Yeah.
In fact,
He's on a
he sets up
very good
defenders,
route tree.
He's very good route runner. And he's so big and so fast, the people give him the cushion and whatnot, and that plays into his strengths. So overall, I have no complaints from that player at all. I mean, DK Metcalf is an exciting player to watch, and he's a great fit in the offense. He's a dependable target for any quarterback, specifically Smith. And what more could you ask from a player? I just,
You can't.
you would love to see him have a little bit more production. Just get him the ball. There's some offenses out there that force feed balls into their favorite targets, and he doesn't have that advantage here in Seattle. They spread the ball out really well. It's probably going to happen again this year. We've just got too many weapons. We talked about in the tight end show that we just had about Kobe Parkinson being a red zone target and needing more opportunities. Well, those come at the expense of somebody like DK Metcalf, who's very much a red zone target in his own right.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team with 2 elite running backs, 3 top end tight ends, and another elite receiver in Tyler Lockett. So this isn't a case where it's the one guy and you're feeding him the ball. The ball's going to get spread around, and he's still averaging over 1,000 yards per season for his career. Remember when it was forever that we had 1,000 before we had 1,000-yard receiver? It went from Bobby Ingram in the early days of the Matt Hasselbeck years until Doug Baldwin finally eclipsed that number, and it was 10 years between it. Metcalf is averaging that his entire career. That'll give you it, and he does it on a team that runs the ball more than any other team in the NFL.
Yeah, no, it's a delight to watch him play. Absolutely, I'm just thrilled that he's on our team, and we're not watching him play for somebody else. And I hope he's here a long time. Has a great career. All right, let's get to the draft pick. 20th overall, Seattle chose Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. The reason I think that he didn't go earlier than that, and it was rumored that he'd go somewhere between 10 and 20, but he hung around. Seattle picked him up. He had a great sophomore season where he had 1,600 yards, 95 receptions in 35 games, and a bunch of touchdowns, including 15 catches for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. Was the MVP of that game. Came back the next year, hurt his hamstring very early in the season, was limited to 3 games appearances in 3 games, 5 receptions. Ended up going in the draft in the first round nonetheless. Special talent. We mentioned the agility already. He's going to be a definite upgrade at the 3rd spot at wide receiver for this team. And we just have not had a reliable 3rd wide receiver in this offense for years at this point. And this is just so exciting. It's going to just make everything easier because Njigba is going to get those balls on 3rd down where they need to pick up 4 or 5, 6 yards. He's going to have a crossing route. He's going to get separation. He's going to be in single coverage. He's going to get a lot of those conversions. He's also has the ability to he's such a natural pass catcher, even if he doesn't have tremendous separation ability in his long speed, he's going to have opportunities to be able to catch the ball because of the way that he positions his body, gains separation because of his route running and precise ability to do that. And just overall a great wide receiver, but they do see him in the slot.
So you look at his production in college. He was on the same team as last year's Rookie of the Year wide receiver.
Garrett and Olave.
Garrett Wilson and Olave was also on that team, but it was Smith-Njigba that led that team that year in receptions. It was him who led the team in yards. He was the best of the 3 of them. Not just statistically, but on the field. And when you they did like the interviews and stuff with the wide receiving core, like Olave and Wilson were both like, nah, he's the better guy. He's the better player. He's a smaller player, but he's the better player. Like they just straight up would call him out and be like, nah, he's the better guy. And of course, I love those interviews because he's all embarrassed by it. And he's like, nah, Garrett Wilson, whatever. And the kid can play. And you're right. He dropped because he had some hamstring issues, and they were serious hamstring issues last year, to the point where the team didn't even have him play in the rookie minicamp. They had him there just watching. Because they're really going to bring him along slow. They're going to make sure that those hamstring issues don't come back. But they've got a guy. This is a special player. He was the best receiver in the draft, and by a wide margin, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Just a natural talent. Just a natural gifted,
talent.
Ball catcher. You go
if
watch
he hadn't
him
gotten
catch
hurt,
balls.
if he hadn't gotten hurt, or if he had the option to come out the year earlier, which he wasn't draft eligible then, but if he had, he would have been a top 10 pick, at least a top 15 pick.
You heard that from multiple sources, including John Schneider.
Yeah, I mean, he's just straight up that kind of guy. So yeah, they got to be careful with his hamstring. So what? Get him healthy, get him, stretched out, get him flexible again, and they've got an elite player.
He was ready to go. He's ready to go. He's 100%. Doctors clear him. He's 100%. He says he's 100%. He's ready to go. He did his pro day. Had great route running, agility, all that stuff came out at that point. And he was at the combine. He's ready to go. Team's just being cautious. So want to make sure we understand that. All right.
Well, so and they have a reason to be cautious because of the next guy that we're going to talk about, who has on paper a lot of talent, but has yet to play meaningful snaps in the NFL in a multi-year career because he's always hurt. Like, to the point where I don't think he can be depended on to be a productive player in this offense.
Well, certainly you can't depend on it right at this point, Keith.
Yeah. I'm talking about Dwayne Eskridge.
Yeah. Yep. So 5'9", 190 pounds, 17 receptions over 2 seasons, 122 yards, 1 touchdown. That's not great for a third-round pick, or a second round.
Second-round pick.
Second-round pick. Okay. So second-round pick, a couple of
so far it's been a wasted pick, especially with Creed Humphrey sitting there. And the thing is, I'm never going to let that go. And I know I need to.
And everyone talks about that. Most diehard Seahawks fans understand that that's exactly what happened, and that's the player we passed on in order to get us. Okay, so let's talk about the potential now. I understand from Bob Candata and covering the OTAs in the last couple of days, he's healthy. He looks explosive, quote unquote. That's Bob's words, and he's ready to go. Now it's so early, Keith. It's so early that, we've got 3 or 4 months for him to get hurt. That's a
lot of time for him to get hurt. There's a lot of time in there. He's peaking too soon in the offseason.
I hate it. We just said that. It really, you know what I mean? We got.
Well, true, but I'm also not being completely. Some of that is
tongue in cheek, unrelated. Right? When you have injuries that are unrelated, sometimes it is just bad luck. Sometimes it's because your body is not able to handle the load of being an NFL professional against other NFL professionals.
If that was the case, then he would be getting hurt during games when he's getting hit by other NFL professionals.
Yeah.
He's getting hurt in practice when he's playing.
History of this stuff.
He's playing against air. And that's the part that is frustrating, is because he went through all of college without getting hurt. And then he goes out his training camp of his rookie year and gets hurt running routes with no defenders, and just has not been able to be healthy at any point since then. And it's not that he's
going to have a struggle now, because Jackson Smith-Njigba is immediately ahead of him on the depth chart at that.
So
he plays.
He's now at best the 4th receiver on this team.
Agreed.
I think he comes into camp as the number 5 receiver on this team.
I do too, and I was surprised you mentioned him before DK Young, to be completely honest.
Well, yeah, but it's I mentioned him because of his draft status, as being, a second round pick and someone that the team thought they were getting like this weapon, that guy that they could, run those jet sweeps and get him the ball like he's coming out of the backfield and just all over the place and get him the ball in space. And they thought they were getting this weapon, and instead they got a guy that has done nothing in 2 years because he hasn't been
What if he
healthy.
lived up to his status? It is a big what if, obviously. But if he does, oh my goodness, we're five deep. We're five
Oh
deep.
yeah,
Yeah, wide receiver. So you
we're
got
at least
Drake
we're at
Young.
least 4 deep. Drake Young is kind of an unknown, but what
Right.
little we know of him looks good. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a guy that he looked great in camp, looked good in the preseason, except for he dropped too many balls, so he ended up
he
buried on
looks
the depth
better
chart.
as the guy that's out there blocking as a
Hmm.
wide receiver. He's very good at that so far. He needs to work into being a wide receiver in the
He's
NFL.
big, he's strong, he's fast. Um,
6'2",
once they got
223.
Yeah, once the game started to slow down for him mentally, he started to look good as a wide receiver. They got him some touches at the end of the game. He had a couple of runs on those jet sweeps that I was talking about that were supposed to go to Eskridge but didn't last year, and turned them into some big gains. And you go, hey, well, that's how you get on the field more. Um, I have big expectations. He's got that breakout player, um, like aura around him. Um, Athletically, he could be special. I need to see it in the game. We need to see him actually do it. Athletically, he could be. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. Go make some plays, kid. I would put him
Before,
over D. Eskridge on the depth chart right now.
oh, absolutely, me too. Before we drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba, he was penciled in as the third wide receiver with a great opportunity to show and have a much larger role in this offense this year.
Yeah.
Now we're going to wait and see. Obviously, he needs to come in and compete. I think that Njigba is obviously going to have an opportunity to get those snaps early, and Tariq Young's just going to be there. And depending on what's going on with Eskridge and how they would want to envision using him, let's just say Eskridge is healthy, is able to impact um, the playbook and the offense. It's a nice problem to have, but I think you take Eskridge's upside. They're completely different types of wide receiver, body type and style and where they would play. But there's only so many snaps to go around. You kind of have to take the upside of Eskridge if he plays up to his potential over a guy like Tariq Young, because
I don't know.
you've already
Tariq,
got DK Metcalf and other guys that are really impacting the roster. If Eskridge is there and doing those fly sweeps as a guy that runs a 4.34 40, and it has the juke moves and in open space. Eskridge was a special player. I mean, let's remember this guy's a second round draft pick for a reason. I'm just saying, if he lives up to that potential, Eskridge could be a special player as well. Tariq Young, special, but yet limited just because physically he doesn't have the speed that Eskridge has.
yeah, but he's so much bigger, and he does have the speed. He doesn't have the quickness. But he has the long speed, and that's the thing that he can do. And having a guy that size with that speed, I
I
mean,
agree. No, I agree.
it's a thing. Eskridge, you were willing to take a guy that was a little smaller simply because he was so quick. He was so good at getting open. He was so elusive in the open field. Um,
Right. We
uh,
just haven't seen it.
yeah, but we
But
haven't
once we
seen it.
see it, once we see it, we know it's there. It's going to be hard to keep off the field.
Yeah, and if Young lives up to his hype, the hype that you and I are generating more than anybody else out there, I should add. But if he lives up to what you and I believe he can be, it's hard to keep him off the field.
I agree. So, I mean, we've already talked about all the we've gone through these shows and we've already talked about all of our weapons that we have on this offense. Now we've added Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jigba, Tariq Young, Eskridge to the conversation. We already have Walker at running back and Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh, and we talked about Noah Fant and Will Disley and Colby Parkinson at the tight end group. Holy cow. I mean,
This team has got a lot of weapons
you could
for Geno.
Geno Smith can conceivably throw to 15 different people in
Yeah,
this offense.
he genuinely can. Geno Smith has a ton of weapons. No one is saying that the team hasn't given Geno the things he needs to be successful. They've also got they invested 2 high draft picks last year in offensive tackles, both of which worked out, and they invested 2 mid-round draft picks this year on interior offensive linemen who are both guys that we'll see if they live up to their potential, but they have the potential to be special, both of them. Now they've got growth to do to get there. That's why they were a mid-round pick and not a first-round pick. But they could both be special. I mean, it's in them to be that way. They've invested a lot into this offense. They've made Geno Smith's job as easy as they could possibly make it. They've also given him a coordinator and a scheme which is very quarterback friendly.
Yeah. I mean, if you love offense, and everyone loves offense,
Everybody loves
defense.
offense.
I love to see a defense, but with an offense like this, man, I mean, this is an offense that's definitely Super Bowl worthy.
It is.
It's going to be about the defense.
At least on paper, the offense is a top 5 offense. This is a team that should average 30 points a game.
Yes.
And that's really hard to do if you think of it in terms of the history of the NFL. But this is an offense that should average 30 points a game if the defense can get the offense the ball. And right now, it's a massive, massive.
Our defense the last 2 years has been so poor. Our offensive, possessions, time of possession in each game has been, closer to 25 minutes a game as opposed to 30. 30, but 30 is average.
Not last year, but the year before that had as much to do with the offense, the Russell Wilson offense, than it did with the defense.
True.
Because when first Wilson was hurt, then he came back, and he came back too soon, and he genuinely played awful. And so I'm not willing to put that all in the defense, but last year's defense was bad. And there's no way to sugarcoat that.
Yeah. And we'll have the conversation as to whether or not they've done enough after a few shows here. All right. So after the main guys are done, the top 5, we've just got a bunch of guys, at this point, in my opinion. It starts with Cody Thompson. I'll mention Cody first just because he's been around the longest. He's literally 27 years old now, Keith.
Is he really?
As an undrafted rookie free agent.
I guess he's had 2 years with the team.
Yeah.
He's a guy that he sticks around because he looks like he's just barely not a guy that needs to be on the roster. He's good. He's a good football player, but maybe not a guy that you want to depend on week in, week out.
He doesn't have a special quality.
Yeah.
Other than he's 6'2", 205. He's got good size, but he's not super fast. He doesn't have super agility. He's a good ball catcher, near as I can tell, because I haven't seen him actually play.
Well, I've seen him in practice and in training camp, and he looks good in those roles. But he looks like he's a guy that, honestly, if he had joined the XFL or USFL, he would be like an MVP candidate.
I agree, Keith.
He's maybe too good for that league, but right on the border of being an NFL player.
Especially with a room like we've got, it's hard to do.
Oh, yeah. He's going to have a hard time cracking the roster, and that's too bad for him. I love that he stuck around and that the team's giving him a chance and they like him and he does good things in practice, but you're going up against Derek Young. You have to take Derek Young's job if you want it. You really think he's going to do that?
It didn't do it last year. And Derek Young was a green rookie. Cade Johnson. Here's a player that's 5'10", 186. Similar role that Eskridge had when he came out. Similar player, similar size, similar speed, similar attributes as far as being a slot guy, shifty, punt returner, kick returner ability, that sort of thing. Cade Johnson.
I'm a little surprised that Cade Johnson didn't do more last year, given the fact that the team struggled from after the top two. There was nothing. There was not much behind them. And Cade Johnson is a kid that last year, yeah, I get that he was undrafted. I don't think he should have gone undrafted, if I'm being honest. But he's a guy that does a lot of things well. He runs good routes. He catches the ball. He plays physical. I kind of expected him to get more opportunities, not because, oh, he deserved them, but because he would earn them. And I was a little disappointed that he didn't go out and earn more opportunities because he, a lot like Cade Johnson, does a lot of things pretty dang good, even if he does not do anything special.
Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, if he comes to camp and he's hungry and he's fighting and, maturity has come in for him, he could definitely take this as his last opportunity to come in and fight for a spot. And if you look at it that way, maybe he's got that opportunity. All right. Aesop Winston appeared in 3 games for the Saints in 2021 and had 10 punt returns for 119 yards. That's his stat line in the NFL.
He's a punt returner. He's not much of a wide receiver.
Right. CJ Johnson, one of the most interesting prospects of the undrafted rookie free agents the Seahawks brought in this year. 6'1.5", 224 pounds. He had 67 receptions, 1,016 yards, averaged 15.2 yards per reception, 10 touchdowns, and 13 starts last year. Our third quarterback, Allers, was his quarterback in college. Very physically strong, plays to his size, utilizes his natural ball skills to put himself between him and the defender. Not a lot of separation with this guy, but he's so physical. He uses all that he's got as far as his physicality to win matchups. And I'm looking forward to seeing if he can somehow find a way to stick around. And you mentioned DK Young. This is another wide receiver that would have to beat out DK Young for a spot.
I don't know if he has to do because at this point, I don't think he's trying to compete for a spot.
Unless they keep 6 wide receivers.
Because I think they keep 6 wide receivers because they don't have as many running backs on the roster as they normally do. So if they keep 6 wide receivers, I think he's got the inside track to be that 6th guy because his athleticism, his size, all those things say special teams, which is what you want out of your end of the roster guys. But if you look at like NFL.com and their draft profiles and everything, and Daniel Jeremiah, who writes a lot of their stuff, had him as a mid-round pick, 4th, 5th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And he went undrafted.
Yeah.
And he was productive.
We're going to talk about is the same.
He's athletic. He's there is a lot to like about this kid. We
watched the film on Allers at quarterback. Both of us said that this kid jumped off the tape.
Oh yeah, we're trying to watch Allers, and I kept being like, "Ooh, who's that receiver? Oh yeah, it's that guy. It's the same guy. Oh yeah, it's that guy again." And then you realize that it's CJ Johnson who the Seahawks signed, and you're like, "Oh, that's cool." Because watching Allers, I was more impressed with CJ Johnson than I was Allers, just straight up. And I just came away from watching Allers going, God, I got to figure out who this other kid is that's out there catching his passes. And he's the other guy the Seahawks signed. So I like him. I like him a lot. I like him as a 6th wide receiver on this team. Quite a bit.
That's interesting to me. It's either that weird piece or you keep 4 tight ends, which is possible because we just mentioned some tight ends in our last show.
Yeah. I would keep the 6th wide receiver just because I want to. But CJ Johnson's got a chance. Like Cody Thompson and Cade Johnson are good players. They're guys that are fringe roster guys, but if you give them if you really are in a pinch and you put them on the field, there was some production there. I might keep CJ Johnson over those two guys. And that's hard to say because I don't like both of those two guys. And I think the two of them were before they signed CJ Johnson, I think those two are fighting for a roster spot. One of them makes the 53. One of them doesn't. Now I don't know.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if either of them makes it. Because
Yeah.
CJ Johnson has a chance to he could be a really good player, even as an undrafted guy. We just don't know about him, and people aren't talking about him because he went to East Carolina.
Well, it shows up. I mean, if anybody wants to go watch some highlights of him, or go watch highlights of Allers,
go watch highlights of Allers.
Watch who Allers is throwing the ball to.
Yep. Go watch highlights of Allers, and then and yeah, because the Allers highlights show you CJ Johnson as well as anybody. And I was impressed. I was just straight up impressed. I think this kid can be good. And I get he's an undrafted free agent, so we're probably talking about someone we may never talk about him ever again. But I was impressed watching his tape.
I like this next kid, Matt Landers, 6'4", 200-pound receiver, next-gen stats, athleticism score, had him ranked second overall of the wide receivers at the combine.
4.37 40-yard dash.
1.51 10-yard split is what I wrote. Like at 6'4", 200
At 6'4". This guy is, he's DK Metcalf light.
Yeah, he's special.
He's not as big, not as cut, all that kind of stuff, but he's just as big and he's just as fast. And honestly, if Metcalf gets hurt and you need a guy that can step in and do what he does down the field, now all the little things, all the underneath routes and all of the route tree and everything that Metcalf does, he's a player on the field running and stretching a defense. I'm sorry, Landers looks like how do you not? He's going to be a guy that I think is going to be hard to not have on the roster.
This guy also had, a 4th, 5th round grade by some draft guys. And,
including Daniel Jeremiah on NFL.com.
He had 47 receptions for 901 yards and 8 touchdowns. So he's a big play threat. A lot of his long speed at that 4.37 40 was displayed in his big playability and getting long touchdowns. Good handsy type player. Needs to obviously develop a route tree, all that kind of stuff. There's a reason why he went undrafted. But nonetheless, this guy's got enough intrigue for me athletically and his measurables to have a longer look at him, especially that 1.51 split.
Honestly, he comes in.
That's crazy.
He comes in, and I look at him in the same way that I looked at Derek Young a year ago. And I know that Derek Young was the second of the 2 7th round draft picks last year, and people had higher hopes for Bo Melton. But I looked at the physicals of Derek Young, and I was like, nah, he's the better guy. He's the better prospect because he has a higher ceiling. Matt Landers has that high ceiling. He's got a long way to go to get to it. He probably will make the roster this year. But I certainly as hell hope is that he lands on the practice squad because if he does, and he's given a chance to develop, he could be good. He needs to develop some lower body strength. He needs to develop a bigger route tree. He needs to stop having those, just concentration laps that leads to too many drops. There's a reason why he went undrafted. He's not like a guy that you could expect to come in and be good this year. But I think long term, there's potential there. There's a high ceiling there. The floor is low.
He was in the top 4 or 5 wide receivers that went undrafted as rookie undrafted free agents to be signed.
Same with CJ Johnson.
On that list. Yeah, both of
those guys are. So, I found it interesting that those guys signed with Seattle. Because you look at Seattle and you go, okay, they got their top 2 guys. They have Smith-Njigba they drafted in the 1st round. Eskridge, Young
after Njigba. really.
Yeah, and
Derek
so
Young, people weren't looking at Derek Young as being a
yeah,
lock or
so
anything like that.
the agents of these players look at Seattle's roster and they say they've got 3 guys. We're looking at 6 spots. The other guys are beatable. You can go in and win a job. You got to fight for it, but you can win a job, and that's why they're having their clients sign with Seattle.
Yeah.
Because honestly, um, there are probably other places where the potential for playing time might be higher, but Seattle's 3 deep with really good players and a big drop after that.
Yeah.
And if you're the agent of Matt Landers or CJ Johnson, you're looking at here's maybe you can have a chance to go actually win a roster job, not a practice squad spot, but a roster job.
So one more guy that's completely the opposite of Landers is Jake Bobo. Same size, 6'4", round 206. Landers was 200, but this guy has 0 athleticism, ranked near the bottom of athleticism score from
But he's
Next Gen
so
Stats at the combine.
tall.
6'4". So Jake Bobo. So everyone kind of recognizes the name a little bit because he played in the Pac-12, UCLA last season. He played with the Blue Devils, Duke, year prior in 2021. Had 74 receptions, 794 yards. Transferred to UCLA his final season. Led the Bruins in receiving with 57 catches for 817 yards, 7 touchdowns, 13 starts. Honorable mention in the Pac-12. Also first team All-American academic. So that's meaningful in that he's a smart guy. Other than that, don't know much about him. I know that all of that. I think he ran like a 4.58 40 and had like a less than 30-inch vertical. I mean, it was just atrocious as far as athleticism. But some guys are just good football players. And sometimes you have to disregard those numbers. You invite the guy into training camp and you find out what he's all about. And that's what they did. We'll find out.
Yeah, I was surprised at his combine numbers. I didn't expect him to go out and just light up, and in all the drills, but he did much worse than I expected him to. I expected him to be better. Because if you go and watch his tape, there's more there than his combine numbers suggest. So I was actually like, cool. I was excited they got him, in this thing. And then I went and started doing the research for this show, and I'm like, okay, those numbers are really pedestrian. But he led Duke in receiving. He led UCLA in receiving, and UCLA was a
With
legit
Chip Kelly's
offense. Yeah, the Chip Kelly offense, and it was a legit offense, an offense that at one point, 2/3 of the way through the season looked like it was competitive to possibly make the college football playoff. And he was the lead target in all of that. So I was surprised at how poorly he did at the combine, and I know that's why he led to me. But still, I mean, there is stuff to like here. I think long term, he's at 206. I read at one point that he was up to 214. If at some point he can get to 235 and become a tight end, which I know is an extra 20 pounds, but his size at 6'4 plus, his arm length, he can play physical. He's not particularly fast. He doesn't win with speed as a wide receiver, so it's fine as a tight end. That might be his long-term, like, if he wants to stick in the NFL, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he drops a little weight and plays faster than his combine times suggest. I don't know, but I was excited that he signed with Seattle, and then really disappointed when I looked at his actual numbers, like his
it's
running
one of those
numbers.
things too, where you get a guy like this in. And there's guys like this that come into the NFL all the time, and he may not make it out of training camp, may not even make it out of OTAs. John
He may
Hall
not.
is another guy, 6'4", 198, ran a 4.54 40, and Tijon Lindsey, undrafted out of Oregon State, 5'8", 171, small guy, really small. And when you go watch the tape on him, he's really small.
He looks
But he ran a
small.
4.4240. So he's shifty, fast, kind of a kick returner.
On
Opportunity guy for
NFL.com,
him.
they've got him as a 4.37 with a 1.51 split.
Oh, okay. Well, very quick.
And
Very,
so
very quick.
yeah, so they've got him with some serious speed, but he's tiny. I thought of him as a kick returner, a guy that that's his what he can do for a team is come in, be a kick returner, hope you can get something else out of him down the road as you develop him as an athlete and whatever. But yeah,
Not a
not
guy
much
we
else.
expect to be even on the practice squad, probably.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that's the class. It's really top heavy. We mentioned a couple other additional players as undrafted guys that may have an opportunity for a bigger look for this team in CJ Johnson and Matt Landers. You've got DK Young that's coming on. Dwayne Eskridge still has an opportunity. The team still believes in him. They still have him on the roster. He's not just cut out of hand. He's going to have an opportunity for a good look. Hopefully, he can stay healthy, show them something, and impact the game or two this year. That would be great. And Jigba's coming in as the 20th overall pick in the 2023 draft. There's lots of expectations that come with that. I think he's penciled in right now, maybe even with a pen, as that third wide receiver for this team, along with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I haven't been this excited to watch an offense develop this year as any other year I can remember. It's just so loaded with talent. And
The
we've
last time I was
addressed
this excited for an offense would have been probably 2013.
Yeah, the second year of Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
The
because you
anticipation of him
saw
getting
the
more.
potential at the
Yes.
end of 2012 and you
Yes.
knew everyone was coming back and you go, all right, I'm ready for this. Before that, I mean, you got to go back to like 2005.
Yes.
And even then, you knew Hasselbeck, you knew Sean Alexander, you knew the
Yeah.
offensive line was great, D Jackson, but
Darrell
who
Taylor,
else?
all that kind of, or not
But there
Darrell Taylor.
wasn't
Who was the
there wasn't
wide
there
receiver?
wasn't that many weapons. This team is stacked with weapons.
Yeah. Yeah, they had Jeremy Stevens at tight end. Then they really didn't have anything else after that. They had a couple wide receivers. Like there's I can't remember the name of the wide receiver. I don't know why it's not coming to me right now. But he had the drops, and so he would be targeted a lot, but he would also drop a lot too. Can't remember the guy's name. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, this
fun
is
offense, and plus the offensive line that you add into the mix. It's just a complete deal, and
yeah.
you're counting on a few things to turn out, but those things have a higher percentage than most years. And I'm talking offensive center, offensive guard. Those things got to turn out, and then you've got to have Njigba turn out as a guy that's ready to go, ready to play and impact the roster right away.
And you
You
need
add
Geno Smith.
Charbonnet.
You need
Yeah.
Geno Smith to not have been a mirage last year.
Well, and right, sure, but I saw enough of him last year. He's gonna.
I don't. What are the chances in your mind that he regresses back to pre last year Geno Smith?
With all these weapons,
1%, 2,
I'll
5.
say 5. I'll say
It's
5%.
the number's really low, and
I think that would be a total mental thing for Geno to do that. Physically, he's got the ability.
Yeah.
So
Our
it would have to be
loyal
mental.
listeners will know that I'm as cynical as it comes when it comes to Seahawk predictions and stuff. I've been burned by too many. I've been a Mariners fan for too long to trust anything. And I know we're talking about the Seahawks, but still, my sports fandom is nothing but awful between the Mariners and the Sonics and all of that. I am as cynical as they come, and I struggle to come up with a reason why this offense won't be fantastic. And even with Geno Smith's track record before last year, I can't come up with why would he regress back? Like, there's nothing here.
The only
There's no
thing that I can give you that I'm hanging 5% on, Keith, is the interception ratio that was heavily in favor of Geno last year, based on some balls that he threw that should have been intercepted that were not, that were
Yeah,
dropped
he did throw interceptable passes that were dropped by defensive backs. He only had 11 interceptions, which is not bad,
on 30
but
touchdowns.
he could have had 20 interceptions, which would have been terrible. There were a
Yes. And
bunch of
once you
balls.
have a few of those that end up being interceptions, sometimes that gets in your head, and sometimes
Yep.
the games get away from you. So they wouldn't have made the playoffs. There's a certain thing that kind of comes with that, the mentality of
Yeah,
that happening, the potential of potentially having a quarterback controversy. I'm just speculating at this point, but a lot of things happen when what hits the fan and you're pressed into a situation. That didn't
no, and I hear
happen,
you with that, but
but I'm
it
saying that it could happen,
could, but
and it
I believe
may not
that
be
he
a
showed
result of what he's doing even.
he showed a mental toughness and resilience
That
last
he did.
year
Absolutely.
to tell me that that's not going to happen. And yeah, it's possible. It's a probability. I just think the probability of it is low. It's really,
I do too.
really low.
Like I said, at 5%. That's me. I don't think, obviously, I don't think it's going to happen, but
Yeah,
he did have interceptable balls that were not intercepted, that if that dynamic changes for whatever reason, that could have a meaningful impact on wins.
true. I'm just I'm I'm naturally skeptical and cynical by nature when it comes to my sports teams. I am very skeptical and cynical in terms of Seattle's defense going into next year, and listeners will hear that here in a few shows. But when it comes to this offense, I am struggling to come up with a reason to not be excited, to
Well,
not have
absolutely.
really high expectations. I
Yeah.
have really high expectations, and I don't like having high expectations because when you have really high expectations, the only thing that can happen is that you can be disappointed by them. Um,
Well,
but I
what
can't
happened with
not.
Metcalf, the thing that happened with Metcalf that that changed us, I think, 4 years ago was he had that rookie season. We went into the off season. He had a terrific training camp. He came in, he was going to start. We kind of tempered ourselves. And then the next year we were like, well, can it get any better? Uh, and,
And then it
and,
did.
and then it did. And then we were like, okay, we're done, holding back. He is who he is. It's the same with Gino, really. It's like, do we let go and just give it to Gino and just let him go and trust that it's going to turn out? And I'm almost there, really.
It's hard not to. It's also hard to let go of the cynicism given my Seattle fandom. But I Gino showed me so much last year: mental toughness, resilience, smarts. I'm not talking about on the field throwing mechanics or any of that. What he had was the ability to overcome adversity and overcome a lot of things and be sacked quite a bit, despite the fact he had got the ball out of his hand pretty damn quick. Um, it didn't matter. He still played good. He showed me a lot. I was really impressed with Gino last year. Shockingly impressed because I had zero expectations for him. I thought he would have lost his job by week 4, honestly. Now I'm struggling to keep my expectations in check and not have just really high expectations for this offense.
Fun. Let's let it ride, man. I
Yeah,
hate to borrow
do
that
it.
phrase from the Broncos, but sometimes you just gotta go for it and allow it to happen. And maybe we should do that.
Yeah.
All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at MW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find it on YouTube. Find it on your favorite podcast platform. Hit that subscribe button. That would help a lot. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.